Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. We begin today with passages from Mahalla Panjwa, the fifth Nanak, in Rag Gaudi Gwareri. And these stanzas are called Chaupade, meaning they are four-versed. There are four verses to each stanza. So let's recite the passage first. Ik oankar Satgur Prasad, किन बिध कुशल होत मेरे भाई, क्यों पाइये हर राम सहाय। कुशल न ग्रह मेरी सब माया, ऊंचे मंदिर सुंदर छाया, झूठे लालच जन्म गवाया। हस्ती घोड़े देख विगासा, लश्कर जोड़े नेब खवासा। गल जेवरी हाउ मैं के फासा, राज कमावे दह दिस सारी। माणे रंग भोग बहु नारी, ज्यों नरपत सुपने बेखारी। एक कुशल मोह को सतगुरु बताया, हर जो किछ करे सो हर किया। भगतां पाया, जन नानक हाउ मैं मार समाया। इन बिध कुशल होत मेरे भाई, यो पाइये हर राम सहाई। रहाओ दूजा। A relatively short passage, but very telling. And the word that we have to focus on here is kushal or kusal. Kushalta has many connotations, and we will see how beautifully it is being used here. So the passage begins with a question, and the question is, Kin bidh kusal hot mere pai, kyun paiye har ram sahai. So that's the central question. Kin bidh kusal hot mere pai, my brother, what is the method that I should adopt, by which course of action can I achieve kusalta? How do I become kusal? Kyun paiye har ram sahai? How do I find that all-pervading and helpful Ram, who is also the Har within? We see this distinction here. Ram is the one who is Ramya, meaning all-pervading, supreme self, who is also the Har within. So the question is being wrapped around, how do I find the Ram through the Har so that I can become wholesome, kushal, healthy, or even skillful. As we have said, it has many connotations, such as skillful, competent, salutary, good health, blameless, and it also refers to the state of bliss, sahaj. So given the context of Gurbani, we can be sure that the fundamental question revolves around the goal of Gurbani, which is the kushalta, or the well-being of the self. So the question is related to, how do I find self-realization? What is the method? What is the skill, which is also kushalta? And how do I acquire, through that method, wholesomeness or self-realization? So it is being used in its broad sense, as well as in the sense of a skill or a competency or an action. So to put it very simply, the question being asked is, how do I find happiness really? Because we are all quite miserable. So first, the Guru begins by telling us what kushalta or wholesomeness is not negation. He says, kusal na grah meri sab maya. That state of wholesomeness cannot be achieved through identification with objects. Meri, that's ownership, by claiming ownership of homes and wealth, or mistaking the shadow for the real thing. Uche mandar sundar, chaya, shadow. We are mistaking the unreal for the real. Jhuthe lalach janam gavaya. And so what happens is that the opportunity of a lifetime is missed through such false desires. It's because our sense of the world is mistaken. And another passage, the next verse rather, is an extension of the first, describing our current state. Hasti kode dekh vigasa, laskar jode nev khawasa, gal jewari haume ka fasa. So hasti kode dekh vigasa. Vigasa is when one blooms with pleasure. So the pleasure that one gets from ownership of horses and elephants, and the pleasure of having a retinue of soldiers and servants. Now, we can all identify with the pleasure that one derives from ownership of goods, commodities, of being able to lord over others. This is something that we can all identify with. We either crave these things or want more of these things, and those are the things that seem to give us some pleasure, even though for the moment. But what Guruji is saying is that all of this is like a noose. Gal jevari, gal, your neck, a noose around your neck, that your ego wraps around you. That's really what it boils down to. And then, of course, the desire to rule over others and in all directions, the desire to consume and indulge in sensuality. Raj kamave dehd sari, mane rang bhog bahunari. This again is a delusion. Not only is it a rope of the ego that is tightening its noose around your neck, but it is also a delusion. Jo narpat supane bikhari. And here it is a reference to an often quoted, quite common story to make a point, the story of a king who dreams that he is a beggar and so is very miserable, feels miserable until he comes to, and then he realizes that all of those feelings of being a beggar were very real, and yet they were not true in the sense that they were actually in a dream-like state. So what we are being told is that our situation is somewhat similar. We are by nature kings, the Har, but we live in a dream-like state and become slaves to our desires and passions. And this dream-like state is brought about by how men, the senses, when they interact with the material world, they create in us this kind of a world. So that's our condition. How does one get out of that? And here the Guru tells us, Ek kusal mo ko satgur bataya, satguru bataya. The true enlightener taught me both the competency. Here the usage of the word kushal is very interesting. It is used both as a skill as well as the state. Ek, here he's referring to oneness of the self, the supreme self, and that oneness is wholesome, ek kusal, and yet This can be read as Ek Kusal, he showed me a skill or a competency. He gave me the competency. Moko Sadgur Bataya. I learnt this from the Satguru. And what was that? Har jo kich kare so har kya bhagta paya. If you are a bhagat of the Har, or a devotee, a divine lover, then the competency is to accept the will of the Har without any resistance. So whatever happens is the writ, is the law. Jana Nanak haume mar samaya. In such acceptance, says Nanak, is the ego dissolved and one achieves self-realization. And then he concludes by saying, by responding to the question he had raised, which was, Kin Bidh Kusal hot mere Bhai. And he concludes by saying, In Bidh Kusal hot mere Bhai. This is the method to achieve the competency or the skill to reach that wholesome state of oneness, to become healthy again. So there is an assumption here that we are by nature unwholesome, that we are unhealthy, and that we are seeking health, spiritual health, so that we can become an integrated, developed personality. And that is the method, is to dissolve the ego, because the ego is the root of our problems. And that is how the ever-helpful Ram is found, as the Har within. Iyon paiye Har Ram Sahib. Rahau Duja. So this passage has two reflections. One was a question, the other was the answer. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.